So in the last classes, we mostly discussed about Docker, right? What is Docker? How do you install run a container? What are the main concept of creating a container? What is called process isolation? How you process isolation? Why Docker actually came into existence by using the Linux native features such as the CNAME and the namespaces. So let me ask you a simple interview question, guys. Since we already discussed almost 50% of Docker. So my question would be very, very simple. What is a namespace? Anybody can answer me?
I think it's a unique Linux feature used by Docker to create a container.
Yeah, but again, somewhat better explanation would be.
So it provides an isolated workspace to create a container.
Yeah, namespaces are something that actually can be used to provide or to create isolation. And the namespaces is that library, which is basically used for the same purpose. That's good. No. Now, okay. So tell me, how do you, what are these keywords such as add, run? So what these basically keywords are? How many keywords are there? Can you describe me a keyword which can be help me to execute a shell command? Anybody?
Docker run.
Right, run. Docker run. I mean, not Docker run, but run. Okay. So why do we use Docker files?
For deployment of applications.
No, Docker files are used basically to build the images. Okay. Very simple again. Very simple question. What are Docker images? Think what are Docker images?
The Docker images are the files which we download to help the project build.
No, Rohit, I think we can make it a bit better. Okay. So if I have to say, yeah, Richa.
It is executed to use the code in the Docker container.
Yeah, I think you're telling me in a realistic scenario, but would you tell the same to an interviewer? No, right? So
Right.
let me rephrase this. A Docker image is nothing but an executable component which can be used by Docker to actually to run a container. So without a Docker image, you can't run a container. So to run a container, you need to build a package. You need to build an executable. That executable is nothing but a Docker image. Okay, that's good. Now, so since we already discussed a lot about Docker directives such as from, run. So have you guys actually looked into this when you got time? What is basically? So let me ask you some tricky questions here. Okay, I mean these are really required. Okay, what is the difference between add directive So what is the difference between add directive? We call it directive, okay? So what is the difference between add directive and copy directive? Any idea? Think, you can also refer. It's not going to be that clear, but if you understand it clear, then I definitely appreciate you.
Add is used to copy the file from the source and paste it in a path, whereas
Yes.
copy is used to take from an path and paste it in a different path.
No, no, no. I think there is some misunderstanding.
And the most important thing is just copy will only let you copy in a local file or directory.
Copy
But
only.
the additional thing which add does is it
Mhm.
allow it allow two other sources.
Right, right, right. So what are them? So let me rephrase, okay? Both add and copy basically does the same function, okay? So 99% you would be using copy to copy the files from your local directory to your Docker container. But what add does is something extra. So instead of a local directory, if you are having all your artifacts in a let's say some kind of I don't know, Nexus 3 or some kind of artifact repository, then add can pull the code by using the URL to the direct your Docker container. Very simple. And also it has one more feature, which in extraction of your zip files. Okay, so sometimes you only you lot of time when you upload to your artifacts, you try to uh, zip them, yeah, to reduce your amount of data that it actually occupy for storage purposes. But add actually I can actually unarchive this particular repository or this particular file. So those are the main two features of add versus copy. Why add is having extra, but most of the time you use copy because you work with copying the files from your local directory to your Docker container. Very good. Now, what is working directory basically does? Anybody? What is work directory basically does? Okay, so the work directory, what happens is that the work directory is something that actually, while creating your Docker file, if you present work directory, WRKDIR, and space you mention a path, you have to mention a path. When you mention a path, then that path becomes a default directory for all subsequent operations, and also even when you are trying to log in, that is going to be a default directory. Okay, so that is a main utilization of work directory. So let me give you some more information. So whenever you try to run commands like by using the directives such as run or cmd or copy or add, okay, whenever you're running these commands, you can run them to a particular directory, right? That directory can become default by using a work directory, and this is the most used command as well. So I hope you understand and remember. Okay, now okay, now we have one more very important directive, which is cmd. So what is the difference between a cmd versus entry point? What is cmd? Can anybody tell me what is a cmd?
It's a default command.
Can you make it better? You are almost right, but again, you missed the whole point. That's why I just want you to rephrase it.
It's a command line.
Uh, okay, let me rephrase. Sorry, let me rephrase it. A CMD is a directive which actually makes, which actually creates a default, okay, a default running command in the Docker container. So the difference is that whenever you write the whole container file, you mention a CMD instruction, okay, only when you need a default command, okay, for the whole container, which can be overwritten by the users. Like if I'm trying to access the container, I can directly overwrite it. So CMD is basically used, okay, as a default, let's say, command inside this container. And it can actually, if you see, if you give, you can also give multiple CMDs, but only the last CMD will become the default command for this container. Is that clear? So you will know it today example, okay? Don't worry. And the last and final question would be, what is an entry point? How it is different from CMD? So what is an entry point? Any idea, guys? What is an entry point? Okay, we just got somebody else, right? Hi, Rohit. So what is an entry point, Rohit?
It is also a command line where the parameters of the command line can't be overwritten by an administrator.
So what do you mean by that? Can you explain a bit? We're able to comprehend it, or can I actually help you?
Yeah, I can. Actually, entry point commands can be overwritten by anyone because they are the baseline commands which are given by the root.
Got it. So they can't be overwritten. Then why do you want to use it when they can't be overwritten?
I guess it is for the security of the container. so that no one can overwrite the code.
No, actually, see, every container, see, I mean, let me rephrase it like this. It's not because of data security or security of anything. The thing is that, see, every container actually runs one process. We are in agreement with that, right? So every container basically used to run, it's not like a Linux machine, which has a capacity to run all the servers or services. Because if the weight of the container is high, the memory demand is also high, which actually can crash the container. Okay, a container is basically designed to run one process very well. Okay, now when you are actually defining a particular, or when you are building a container, you need to run a service by default in a foreground process. Okay, you can't run a service in the background process. So normally in Linux, if you run a process, it runs in the background. Suppose you run Apache 2, it runs in the background. You're not going to get all the logs and everything in the foreground, do you? No, right?
No.
So similar way, this is not the same when you actually get into containers. So the containers by default run only one process, and that process has to become foreground because you have several different reasons for the same. So if you want to run a process in the foreground, and now you have used CMD, now somebody wants to see what is going inside the container, but they don't want to stop the process that we designed, which is running in the foreground, to be disturbed. But when I actually go in interactive mode, that is Docker -it, and give the name of this container with the process that I want to run, then I would be disturbing this, this process because it is overwritten by the user. But when you are actually deploying in a, when you are actually maintaining an application in production environment, none of your service-oriented process should ever stop. So in such case, you mention this with an entry point. Is that clear? Why do we use entry point? Where do we use entry point?
So if we execute the code in entry point, then you can't means manipulate the process with command line.
You can't override.
Okay, okay.
So that means you can't go into the container, okay, by actually killing this process directly into the container.
Okay, okay, got it.
You command. You can't do that. You can only run the service and let it free, and then you have to just manage it. If the service is stopped, obviously your process is killed, so you can obviously get in. But if the service is not stopped, if the process is still running, you can't do anything. So what if you really understand all these commands, I really appreciate, but I still recommend to actually go through the commands that we just discussed today. These are the most important commands, and people really play with interview candidates time to time in India at least. So I believe in foreign country mostly they discussed about architecture of applications, why this and that, maybe use case based scenario. But in real time, when you actually go and maintain applications, this actually has a paramount value in terms of comprehension and maintaining. I mean, if you want to deal with the Docker deployments or Docker files. Okay. So I hope you actually work a bit more on the same. It's a good that you actually gone through it. So let me continue the class. I will be discussing now regarding, so we already discussed whatever requirement we have with respect to Docker, building Docker uh, building Docker images. Now, I'm going to give you a small example, okay? And then we're gonna move on. So Okay, now we are ready. So this is an app which has some HTML codes, okay, and there is some image. Now the Docker file is all written, but we're gonna check, we're gonna see how to write a Docker file. So the defaultly you have to write with the name called Docker file, but that is not a restriction. We can also use different name like Docker file hyphen, let's say service name. So we have such kind of a management for almost a production application which has 5 to 7 services. So we maintain like that. We can also do the same. Now let's see. So in this Docker file, how it is written? The first one is from. Obviously, you would be basing some kind of application or some kind of a container, on the top where you can write it. So what I'm actually using is nginx. I hope you already know what is nginx, right? It's like Apache. So I can show you a small sample as well. Okay, good. Same. So if we check, this is my local. You see? Okay. So nginx is nothing but a web server, similar to Apache. There's no Apache in my box now, but I just install nginx. Okay. So there is already a file. Okay. In this location, that is my nginx code base. Okay. So this index.html, check. Okay. This is gonna be Apache wala. Okay. This is the page it is actually serving. I can actually change this. It's not be a problem. I can say remove this page. Okay. And then move this index.html to index.html. So if we check, it's gonna change. You see? Clear? So this is another web server. Now, let me take this out. Now, coming to the Docker file, I have just used nginx image and I have used the latest version. Okay, you want to check what is the latest? Go to Docker Hub. click here, Nginx, go to official repo, and check for the tag. This is the latest. So I'm using 1.19.0. Now, what I'm doing, I'm basically copying everything here. I'm copying an index.html, this file, to the default directory, that is user share Nginx HTML directory. And I'm also copying this particular image to the same directory. I'm running port 80 and 443 open. And here, if you see, this is a default command line. Okay, the default command is run this nginx -g, that means global, daemon off, that means make this into foreground. Okay, so you want to know more on this nginx, oh, so if you check, so when you say what do you mean by daemon off, and there are a lot more files actually. So this is very specific to Nginx, this daemon off. Okay, you have to go and learn a bit of Nginx if you want to work with Nginx. But learning Nginx always helps you, because it is one of the most popular, let's say, is the most popular lightweight web server. Okay, so now I want to build this container. How can I build this? Docker build -t means tagging, what I'm going to tag with. Okay, I have to tag in such a fashion that it actually helps me to directly push to Docker Hub directory. So if you look my Docker Hub directory, I'm sorry, I'm logged in as somebody else. So this is my method, Abdul. So whatever my Docker Hub username, I'm gonna write that. Okay, and then I'm gonna write what is the repository that I actually created with this. So whenever you say create repository, you're gonna name a repository. That name is this one, ES, AWS, or whatever. So I'm going to just write another name, demo. Okay, now everything is good. I have even tagged the name, but you also need to mention the version. This is latest. Okay, now latest is a default tag. If you can use it, please use it. Otherwise, if you are actually restricted by the version names, then yes, you have to keep up with that. So now you have the latest. Okay, now dot means current working directory. Search for any Docker file. Search for any file with the name called Docker file and use it to build this Docker image. That is the meaning of the dot. Okay. Now Docker build, I'm going to execute. It is done. If you see Docker images, you can check. So we already created a spacebound doggy. Remember? So this is something else we just created today. Okay. So that's it. And you can run this. Shit, sorry. Oh, it's saying that already this is already in use, the port number. So I don't know what I'm running inside. Let me check. Ah, it's already in use. Okay. You see? Now it's a Docker. Is that clear, guys? How I built a Docker container from ground up by using Docker file. Okay. Any doubts? Tomorrow we're going to check on Docker Swarm, and that is going to be the last class. So tomorrow we're going to discuss Docker Compose along with Docker Swarm. We're going to see both of them. So it's going to be a bit tight class, but we have to close this up to actually start working with no, the last class, which would be Terraform before we go in cloud. Okay. So make sure you prepare yourself a bit better with the Docker because it's going to be really required in your jobs. Okay. So that's all for today. Any questions on this, guys? Amaya, Richa, Rohit, any questions on the same?
No questions.
No question.
Rohit?
No, we're good. We're good.
Perfect, Rohit. Okay, so let's get together on tomorrow and we're going to discuss Docker Compose. You can actually read through if you have a bit more time. But Docker Compose is also very native to Docker. But we're going to work with the Docker Compose as well, along with the Docker Swarm, which is production grade. Okay. So, bye bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you all.